Hat Atelier is the best manga that I've read, which will probably never have an anime that does it justice. Sure, there might be an admittedly slim chance that it even gets an anime adaptation in the first place, but really, this manga is a love letter to illustration. Though what is Hat Atelier? Well, it's a fantasy manga created by Kamone Shirahama, who, prior to creating this manga, primarily worked on cover art for Marvel and DC, and also worked on a few other smaller series. It was published by Kondasha in the monthly Morning 2 magazine. Believe it or not, this is a seinen series, which may seem surprising simply looking at its cover. One would think that it's geared towards a shoujo or even josei demographic, but you know what they say about judging books by their cover. Fortunately, these covers are just as good as the chapter pages. The fact that this manga is in a monthly magazine allows its art and story to have more time invested in it. That said, let's take a look at that art because it's rather distinctive, with minimal use of screen tones, and instead favors more illustrative techniques like hatching to shade in the characters, along with the environments during the inking phase of the manga's production. This gives the manga an old-fashioned feel to it, like it's been printing through a woodblock press rather than an industrial-grade printer. The setting itself is far more rustic than its contemporaries, opting for early medieval architecture as opposed to the later Gothic and Renaissance styles that others use. This decision further adds to this rustic look, and in the case of the eponymous atelier, makes for a very cozy aesthetic. Then there are the spectacularly magical places in the world like the Dada Range, the Serpentback Cave, and the abandoned city of Romanon. They are genuine locales in the world that have a history and intrigue about them, which the visuals help bring out. Then there is the magic system, which would likely need its own video to break it down, so we will only go over the basics of it. Magic in this world is drawn with ink and can be done by anyone who knows this. Naturally, this fact is kept secret from the masses by most witches, who don't want all that power being abused again. Otherwise, things would be like the Dark Ages of the world. So, the Pointed Hat witches made some enforced rules. Mainly that magic which directly affects the body and mind is forbidden, save for one spell. The memory wiping spell that is used to maintain said secret of magic. This can include transformation spells, teleportation with outdoors or vehicles, heck, even healing spells are a no-no. So, what does this have to do with the story? Well, let's start out with the main character, shall we? Coco started out just like any other traditional fantasy protagonist, growing up in a scenic rural village with her mother working as tailors. One day, she came across a mysterious witch who gave her a book of spells. Of course, she had no idea that magic is drawn until much later, when another witch by the name of Keyfray, who arrived at their home in search of cloth, and also to repair a flying carriage that had broken down outside their house. Coco, being fascinated by the magic, decided to secretly observe him work on the carriage's seal. She then realized the secret behind magic. She then put two and two together and started practicing with the book of forbidden spells that was given to her earlier. Naturally, this goes horribly, horribly wrong, as one of the spells she draws envelops her house and her mother in crystal. Keyfray manages to save her and resolves to teach her magic in hopes of undoing the spell and possibly finding the one responsible for giving her the book. That's the inciting incident for her, but who is Coco as a character? The biggest part of her character is her fascination with magic. Having been raised as a normal girl, she's only had folklore and rumor to go off of. Now she has the eagerness and motivation to learn it properly. While she's rather optimistic and energetic, there are times where she has made rash decisions out of desperation, though a lot of it has to do with her being way in over her head. That said, she does have a lot of determination and excellent problem-solving skills. There have been several times where she had to apply what little knowledge of magic she has to get her out of a sticky situation. Take her first trial in the Dada Range, where she was tasked with plucking the diadem herb from the top. This was not assigned to her by her mentor, but rather her peer Agate, who had a major chip on her shoulder, but we'll get to her. Coco was allowed one magical item. She decided to borrow Agate's levitation boots, which she immediately got wet and made useless by the water at the bottom of the range. So instead, she had to jury-rig a glider out of a rowboat's sail and oar, plus a very crudely made wind sigil. Like, it's just wind sigil and a big honking directional arrow pointing forward. Yet, it still worked, and she managed to complete the task, much to Agate's whatever mix of conflicted emotions that she's displaying right here. Overall, I'd say she fulfills the role as an audience stand-in while still having her own personality. What's that? Oh, right, her design. Yeah, it's okay. In our color pages, she's got greenish blonde hair and gold eyes, which is kind of interesting, I guess. She shares the apprentice robe style that the other apprentices in Keyfray's Atelier, so beyond her hair, there's not all that much to make her distinct from the other members, especially in the black and white color pages. The design's solid, if a bit average.
Awesome!
Agate is probably the most visually striking apprentice of Keyfray. I mean, yeah, the fact that she has black hair when all the other students have colors that are effectively white in the manga helps, but there's more to her design than just that. Her sharper yet thicker than average eyelashes sell her serious, no-nonsense personality. Early on, she really does not like Coco, as she sees the new arrival as being unworthy of studying alongside her. This mainly stems from the expectations put on her by being part of a very prestigious family of witches. Fortunately, Coco does prove herself to her, both through the Dada Range incident and that one time the students got teleported into a dragon's lair. Overall, she's an excellent foil to Coco because she's a prodigy when it comes to magic, but she does lack Coco's perspective and lateral thinking. When confronted with a problem, Coco will usually have an idea, and Agate will be able to execute on it because she knows enough about magic to actually follow through on the idea. I really like her dynamic in the group, and I can't wait to see her family members show up in the later chapters.
Awesome!
Tethya is the second most distinctive apprentice in the Atelier in both personality and appearance. In colored renders, she has curly pink hair done in a twin-tail style and light brown eyes. Unsurprisingly, she's the most energetic member of the apprentices. She's the first one to warm up to Coco, and she acts as something of a stabilizing force between Coco and Agate. Aside from that, she's mostly a side character in the grand scheme of the series. So aside from wanting to master cloud magic or something, there's not much else really to say about her.
Brutal!
Rika is the most reserved member of the apprentices. The fact that her hair looks a lot like Coco's, but longer, when in the regular manga pages, makes her blend in quite a bit. In the colored pages, her hair is way more distinctive as a sky blue. As for her characterization, she really only gets development during the Knight's Loyalty test. This is where we see her personality on display, and she's rather stubborn. You see, she joined Keyfray's Atelier in order to practice her own magic without interrupting. In essence, she's a specialist. Outside of that arc, she really doesn't get that much focus, so she's essentially another side character.
Brutal!
Ooh, boy, we're getting into the big players now. Keyfray is the master witch at the Atelier. When in colored pages, he's depicted with ashen hair and a gray cloak. Under that, he wears a black long-sleeved shirt. He also sports a pair of spectacles, one of which is blacked out, hinting at his backstory. Without spoiling much of it, let's just say he has a big beef with the brimmed hat witches who practice forbidden magic. He wants to seek them out because of some incident that happened in his youth. Naturally, Coco's encounter with one of them is one of the reasons why he took her under his wing, though by the time we hear about his backstory, he has fully assumed the role as her teacher, no longer seeing her as a means to an end. Also, he's a water magic specialist who was scared of water as a kid. Ironic, huh?
Stylish!
Old Rugio is the watchful eye for Keyfray's Atelier. He's a major foil to Keyfray. Where Keyfray is whimsical and a bit of a pretty boy, old Rugio is the disheveled pragmatist who's sworn to keep Keyfray on the straight and narrow. However, because the two go back a long ways, he really doesn't always stick to the rules. Also, he's a fire specialist to complete that contrast with Keyfray.
Awesome!
It's that time of Design Dungeon again where we do a lightning round. Before we get to the Brim Hats, we're going to go over a few minor characters that show up over the chapters. Alaria, nice hairstyle, and she plays a part in the Knight's Vow arc.
Awesome!
Kirkwall, great design, absolutely awful teacher. Makes the Knight's Vow arc all the more tragic for Uni.
Brutal!
Uni, or as I like to call him,
Boy.
Witch. I was half tempted to go into detail about him, but without spoiling much, I'll just give this. No, don't turn me into a furry!
Awesome!
Baldarite. I thought Keyfray was bishy. Then I saw his master.
Brutal!
Alright, finally we can do the Brim Hats. First on the block is Sasaran, who is the second Brim Hat which we see, but who is the first that really gets to showcase their abilities. Normally he uses a floating cloak and brimmed hat in order to hide his appearance. In truth, he's a witch who conducted forbidden experiments that resulted in him fusing with his cat. Yeah, he's the one that turned Uni into a furry. He also favors very offensive, blasty spells, befitting his more expressive personality, which also contrasts him against the other Brim Hat we've seen.
Awesome!
Iguin is an enigma. He's the one who gave Coco the Book of Forbidden Spells. Aside from that, all we know is that he's been following her progress as a witch. And he's really powerful too. You remember that dragon incident I mentioned before? He teleported the apprentices to the locale of the dragon. Clearly, Iguin is strong. More importantly, I also believe he's a diviner. Take a good look at his mask. It's an eye, which evokes the idea of an all-seeing eye. It's clear that this witch also has some form of foresight, especially concerning how he always knows where Coco is without needing to be near her all the time. More importantly is that he keeps going on about how she's going to be their salvation. Exactly what that means is incredibly uncertain. There's just enough mystery about him to give us something to speculate about without becoming a silly, "Ooh, I'm so mysterious, everything is going to our clearly thought out plan that totally isn't a mystery box" sort of character.
Awesome! For now!
Now, before I sign off and recommend the manga to anyone who's lasted this long through the video, I want to answer the question of why would I review some obscure fantasy manga that probably will never have an animated adaptation? Well, there are several reasons. The first of which is that I'm a fantasy junkie who really likes works that aren't grime-covered cynicism fests that drain every last bit of wonder out of their world. I also really like manga. I grew up on a lot of Shonen Jump, and the last few years have also been kind of sparse for me in terms of finding genuinely unique manga. Hat Atelier is a breath of fresh air from so many properties that rely a lot on JRPG game design in both their presentation and world building. Sure, some do it well, but that gets tiring after a while. It's something that's genuinely inspiring with its visuals and story. So much that I consider it an influence on my own project. The highest praise I can give something is that it has inspired me to make art, and even learn from it. There are only a handful of works that have impacted myself in this way. If you can go to a local store that sells manga, by all means, get it there. Otherwise, order it online because this is a genuinely good series. If you like manga and want something fresh, get it. If you like fantasy but aren't totally sold on manga or anime, get this because it's devoid of a lot of cliches that tend to turn people off. You're not gonna get any cheesecake in this manga. We have 12 Beasts for that. That will do it for Witch Hat Atelier. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more content. I've got something in the works, but it's taken a while to view the episodes because it's surprisingly long for a Netflix series. I'll see you all next time on Design Dungeon.